Welcome to the Worldwide Robotic Milking Podcast with Gareth Jones of Robotic Milking Systems and John Gerbitz of Cow Corner Consulting. This is the international podcast dedicated exclusively to robotic milking topics from planning through production.
Hi, I'm Gareth Jones from Robotic Milking Systems in the UK.
And I'm John Gerbitz from Cow Corner Consulting in the US.
And this is our podcast, Worldwide Robotic Milking. John, good to see you again. We're on to I think maybe it's our sixth pod now. We've introduced ourselves. We've looked at feeding on 3 different episodes. And I think today we felt it'd be a good idea to talk about labour. And the reason we're talking about labour is not so much from saving labour point of view with robots, and we'll get into that in more detail where there's a saving to be made, but it's a different sort of labour and it's very much a different working day. So from a routine point of view, I think we both feel that the day's more flexible, and that's one of the main attractions on a family farm. So what sort of things are you talking to people about who are going into robotics in terms of how they have to, think about their day differently, John, compared to conventional milking twice a day?
I think first I want to talk to people about what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done as contrasted to their parlor or tie stall barn. And so you're probably going to spend some time maintaining the robots that you weren't spending before, and that's on a daily basis, some routine checks to avoid alarms, and then depending on the level of your technical ability, some time doing maintenance and maybe even doing all of the maintenance themselves, and more time looking at records, because the things that we saw on the cows by physically looking at the cows in the parlor, now we need to find those things in the records. And so you need to plan on spending a little more time than on that. I think another thing that changes is how we handle the cows, and thinking about completing management tasks while the cows are in the pen rather than removing the cows from the pen. So how will we distribute bedding? How will we scrape stalls? How will we scrape alleys? How will we restrain cows and manage them for things like herd checks or synchronization protocols and breeding, and different approaches on that? Some people are managing cows in the stalls. Some people are using headlocks. Some people are using management areas in the barn, but all of those, how we approach those things are going to affect not only call flow, but also the amount of labor that's involved in the barn. I think there are some differences in the labor area between guided flow barns and free flow barns. What are you seeing on that?
Yeah, for me, all the guided systems I've been to in the UK and Ireland, they all tell me they're not fetching any cows at all. And that'd be one of the main reasons for them going down that route, particularly on larger units, is there's no fetching involved. The only situation I think what they said there is some fetching would be potentially with some fresh heifers coming in. So if you compare that to, say, a free access system, where I think we all agree, if the balance is right in the herd with feed in the robots and on the feed fence, we're only talking about 5%. So each end of the day. So for some people, they don't see it as an issue. Again, a family farm, 2 robots, maybe one person pretty much managing it, be part of his daily routine, just go and pick cows up. If you've got a bigger unit with 10 robots, then that can become maybe half a labor unit a day, just picking cows up. So it depends on the scale, but for me that would be one advantage of a guided would be the labor aspect. Yep. So I don't know if you agree with that, John, if that's what you're seeing as well.
I agree that there will be more fetching in free flow barns than in guided flow barns. You mentioned that the training part of it, and people talk about semantics of whether a heifer that you're training is really a fetch heifer. And I agree that no, she is not the same as that cow that's 200 days in milk and got lazy, but in the terms of what you are doing out in the barn and how that applies from a labor standpoint, I think we can group them together that way. And certainly that will still be, that training is an important part either way, whether you're training cows in a free flow barn or a guided flow barn. I think one of the differences in the training labor in a guided flow barn is that first we're training cows to the gates in a guided flow barn. And in a free flow barn, we're kind of training them to go to the robot at the same time as it's one thing. In a guided flow barn, we've got two different things. We're training them to the robot and also training them to the gate. Seen barns where actually dry matter intake on fresh cows, or particularly fresh heifers, suffered because the heifer had not learned the gates and didn't know how to find her way to the bunk. So it's more of a two-step training process, maybe a little more training up front on the guided flow barns, but in the end, I would agree that day in and day out, in terms of those cows that get lazy about coming to the robot, we'll certainly be dealing with less of those in a guided flow barn.
I think one of the things, one of the main messages I hear all the time is the word flexibility. So with labor, although when I'm doing my figures, I don't necessarily say anyone's going to save any labor. If we just take a simple 120 cow herd through a conventional milking parlor and they want to put 2 robots in, for me that's still going to be, at least a one-man operation. But on a small scale like that, where the dairy farmer has been really so tied to the parlor, and now they might say, well, I'm still spending as many hours around the cows, but I can now take my kids to school in the morning. I can now go and watch my son play rugby or football in the afternoon. So I think flexibility is really one of the big ones. And also, if you're looking to attract somebody on a slightly bigger unit, to milk cows for you, well, you're going to get a better quality person who's interested in managing cows with robots. So again, I don't know what your thoughts are on this and what you see in the US, but I would have thought it would be a similar sort of vein.
I agree that it's a completely different skill set in the people that you're looking for. And for some cultures, if people prefer to work with other people, they're going to like parlor milking better than working in a robot barn. If they like working individually, problem solving, figuring things out, they're going to really find a fit and a lot of satisfaction in the robot barn. You mentioned flexibility, and I think the other thing, the lifestyle flexibility is certainly important. But in addition to the lifestyle flexibility, there's also the flexibility for getting work done. So if a robot dairy is harvesting their own forages, I recall from my experience as a dairy farmer that 5 o'clock was when I was supposed to head to the barn to do chores. And it was also when the hay was most likely to be dry. And so to have that flexibility, if the robots allow you to harvest, beat a rainstorm, whether it's planting or harvesting, that certainly is another way that it changes your labor, even though your hours might not change that much.
Fairly similar. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I it's another good point, because I talk to quite a lot of farmers who, out in the fields doing something, silage making, come 4 o'clock, you've got to down tools, head in, milk. They can say, well, today we're going to do our routine work at 7 o'clock in the evening because we want to get this job done. So definitely flexibility is a huge one.
I think when we talk about saving labor, the other thing to be realistic about is, where are we going to cut labor? Who's going to get fired when we reduce our labor requirement? And so if it's a family farm, say there are 3 brothers, and we talk about saving labor on that farm, unless one of the brothers is planning on leaving when the robots come online, we're really not going to save any labor. We may reallocate some labor, we may change quality of life, but we're not going to reduce the labor bill on that farm. And you talked before we came on the air, you mentioned some insights that you had about where labor saving fits into the payoff on a robotic project.
Sure. Yeah, for me, labor quantifying. So we've talked about flexibility of labor and how we see it, and that's great. Actually, quantifying it is very, very hard. So when I'm talking to people who are dairy farmers who are conventional milking at the moment, and we're looking to say, right, let's see our figures stack up if we put robots in. The way I look at this is I'm going to assume you're not going to save yourself any labor in terms of cost. You might do. You might save some labor, and if so, absolutely great. If it's a house system, and if you get your feed ration right, and we get all the balance right in the shed, which we can do, you'll produce 15% more milk. So the payoff is the extra milk. That needs to be the focus at no extra cost in terms of labor. So if that farmer was milking twice a day and he wanted to go 3 times a day conventional milking, he's going to pay for a night milker. So it's going to cost him £50 a milking at night, and then he's got to be able to maintain that labor to do it. With robots, we get that extra 15%, and we get that third milking. We're going to go 3 visits for no extra cost. So for me, that's how robots stack up against conventional milking, and that's the way I tend to work my budgets for anyone who's thinking about going in this direction. Because to quantify, right, I think you're going to save yourself half a man is very hard to do, because everyone has slightly different routines, and then they can end up being disappointed. So this is, for me, this is the best way of looking at it.
I agree. A few years ago, I saw a study, and I don't remember the specifics. It measured robot efficiency in terms of pounds of milk per hour of labor. And there's been a lot of different work done on this. As I said, I'm not good at keeping the numbers in mind, but what struck me on this survey, they compared pounds of milk per hour for robots versus parlors. And the most labor efficient parlors are more labor efficient than the least labor efficient robots. And it kind of goes to what you're saying about that. The labor savings is not a given. It's going to be different for every farm.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. It's not a given. And I've seen some people saying, labor is going to be down to 60 or 70%. I think it's dangerous territory. And so that's the way I prefer to look at it, John. Yeah.
I saw, I follow a few different robotic milking Facebook pages, and there was a discussion recently on the pros and cons and the would you do it again. And this one person's comment was just so summed it up for me as we look at the different returns and labor on robotic milking. I'd just like to take a minute and read that comment, because I think it was really good. I'll leave the poster anonymous, but it said there's a lot more to robots than just milking the cows. They change the whole environment and life of the animals as well, all for additional bonus. The barn becomes just a nice, quiet place where cows just go about their business. Cows last longer, better, longer lasting udders through the flexible milking. We've seen conception rates rise significantly. Cow health improves as you feed a cow based on their needs. Fat cows disappear. Just some things you got to consider besides what it would cost for the machine. And I just kind of summarizing that we tend to look first at labor and yield as the returns, but there's so much more to it, and it changes the way we manage cows in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And like you said, there's all sorts of benefits, hidden benefits that not everyone thinks about. And as you said, quite often the discussion starts with labor because people are struggling to get good labor. And they might have milked cows for 30 years and they just feel they want to extend their working life. And so robots are a way of doing that. So they don't have to milk cows anymore. We know what the costs are. But as you say, there's lots of other benefits. Cows get so much more quiet. We get an increased milk yield. It's a nice lifestyle. It's a great life for a cow. So as you say, quite often labor is where it starts, but it's not necessarily where it ends.
When I used to teach the herd management classes for people who either had recently put in robots or considering robots, and the other instructors and I would gather in the evening and we speculate about which ones would make it and which ones wouldn't, and we kind of about what kind of labor, what kind of mindset works in robotic milking. And I think for those that put robots in because they would rather spend time on tractors and let the cows take care of themselves,
yeah,
those generally don't go very well. And if that's your view of how labor is going to work in the robot barn, probably keep the parlor. But I think for those who are cow enthusiasts and want to manage cows in a different way and manage cows themselves together with a machine rather than hiring other people to manage cows, this is going to be a really good fit. I'm working on a assessment this where I will evaluate farms on the success factors, and one of the sections on that scorecard is labor, and at the top of my list for that labor scorecard is there somebody who's enthusiastic about robots, and is there somebody who's enthusiastic about cows? And if I've got, and it doesn't have to be the same person, but both of those components have to be covered. And if I've got those covered, a lot of the labor stuff falls into place from there.
Yeah, sure. The one phrase I use is, if you're doing a really good job milking cows conventionally, then robots are most probably for you. If you're not doing a great job, you're most probably going to struggle with robots. So yeah, I think we both come from the same angle on that one.
Yes, I heard, I was at a extension meeting a couple of weeks ago, and Jim Selfer from the University of Minnesota had numbers comparing returns in parlors versus robots. And his take-home point, the way Jim said it, was you don't want to be a bad robot farmer, and that on the best managed robot farms, the returns are competitive with parlors. On the poorly managed robot farms, it's going to bring out your problems and make them more evident.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, interesting.
Very good. I think we've kind of covered what we have on the labor, and I look forward to our next episodes when we maybe look a little more at what we're measuring in robots, what do we call success in our respective market areas.
Thank you, John. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Worldwide Robotic Milking Podcast, where Gareth Jones of Robotic Milking Systems and John Gerbitz of Cow Corner Consulting share their insights on robotic milking around the world. Join us again for the next episode, and be sure to like the show where you listen to podcasts.